everybody. Justin with the Three Geeks Podcast. I have PJ with me. How you doing, PJ?
Good, man. How you doing?
Doing well. You're an actor. Can you kind of tell us kind of a little bit about yourself? Like maybe what got you started in the industry and what you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. My whole journey to where I am right now is sort of wild because when the plague, I call it when the plague hit, but when COVID hit the city, I 30 years in New York, maintaining a really nice career of a mix of boards and TV and voiceovers, so just a mix of all kinds, every sort of aspect of what we do. And when that dropped, it sort of forced my hand to have to come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is where I'm in now, which is what I call the murder shed. It's my little man cave, which is where I do these kind of things and create this. I tend to play a lot of bad guys, so I want to separate that from my wife and kid a little bit when I'm working on stuff.
Is that more for your voiceover work then? Like just a lot of your voiceover work happens in
all things included. I do auditions in here if the piece is right and it sort of fits visually. I sort of approach auditions as a filmmaker these days because we have to tape everything. So that forced my hand to completely start fresh in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's weirdly has sort of, I have not stopped working since I landed here.
That's incredible. That's great. Yeah.
Work back in the city and keeping, ties there, and also finding these really great opportunities all along the South to work on projects that I wouldn't necessarily have a chance to work on because they're down here, and, working with some great people. But yeah, I mean, I started, a guy came into college to get his green card actually and take over our theater department at the University of Rochester. And his name was Mervyn Willis, and he had experience with the Royal Shakespeare Company and had all these great tales from stage management working into then becoming a director, and had these incredible stories. And he took over our theater department right when I was kind of poking I'd done a little theater in high school, much to my parents' chagrin. Like the Annie or we did Annie, and then we did You Can't Take It With You, the classic old play.
I did that in high school too.
Yeah, it seems to be a standard. And then when I went to, we just vibed, and he did. His first production was The Alchemist, which was Ben Jonson, which is like Shakespeare on crack. And then he did Nicholas Nickleby. He did the whole 8-hour production that had just been done with Roger Rees in New York, and was a huge, not just been done, but he took on all 8 hours and he cast me as Nicholas.
That's awesome.
And that, that just changed I saw the magic of theater, and we transformed this room into something special. And friends that I, met in that show are still friends of mine, today.
That's
it was
awesome.
It was a very special experience. And then that we ended up leaving college and touring Russia with the brothers Karamazov, through also connection with La Mama because of Mervyn's connections there. And then that whole tour of Russia brought us into the final performance was at La Mama in the Lower East Side. So my entryway into theater in New York City was like avant-garde theater, which was just what a great place to start from and create the beginnings of stuff to sort of branch out from. And on that, I was hooked. I was in.
That's super cool.
I never left. I stayed in New York until a plague forced me away.
To Oklahoma. That's a movie in and of itself. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. I'm writing it now.
That's awesome. So we'll talk about your film and TV shows here in a second. But do you get a chance to do more theater? Do you do stuff around where you're at now, or not really?
Since COVID, that went out the window. I just because we were recently in a SAG strike, the actors strike. We couldn't do any films, and weirdly enough, because for too many years, and it's still on AOL, an old director reached out for me from New York, who I hadn't really worked in probably 20 years or more. And he's like, "Hey, I got this thing. We're rehearsing in the city, and it's 3 one-acts, And yeah, they were great. So I came back to the city and did a play which I hadn't done, which was so weird for me. I'm always coming from the board. Well, originally I come from the boards and then tackled film. And
Yeah.
then to be in a situation where I'd really probably done like 3 years of nonstop film work in varying degrees of,
Mhm.
lead to whatever. And yeah, to suddenly jump back into theater was a very strange, newly strange experience.
That's
There
awesome.
was
So, yeah, sorry.
no, it just there was something about I started to become a fan of you do the scene and you're done with the scene and
Yeah,
you put it out there and it's done and then you move on to the next scene. You get used to shooting all out of order, but there was
sure.
something about holding on. One of the pieces we were working on was like two brothers who end up holding guns on each other, and it's a
Mhm.
sort of to spin in that all week yeah, it was a different kind of it got into my under my skin a little bit too.
Yeah. Do you think that do you get into character easier than in theater because of you're basically into the whole story and it flows cohesively, ideally through it
I
while
mean,
you're
there's,
doing it?
obviously there's something nice that you start at the beginning of the story and the audience
Yeah,
is with you and you tell it to the
yeah,
end. It's
yeah.
it's just a unique, it's really apples and oranges. I mean,
Sure,
the
sure.
text, the techniques that you use in both are similar in regards to, as everybody's spoken about, you sort of just turn down the volume.
Mhm.
I'm filling up a big theater and I have to bring that performance to the guy in the back row seat,
Mhm.
552. And in film, the audience is right there. They're up in your face. So that does the work for you. But there's principles you can use in both to much success.
Sure, that's awesome. And speaking of getting into character, we can talk a little bit about Hunter S. Thompson. Like,
Hmm.
holy cow, what a character to
Yeah.
portray! That's a heavy. Like, as soon as I saw your name attached to that, I was like, holy cow, that's a name. That's a
Yeah,
big
man,
name.
it's big britches. When I got it, I was like, "Holy shit, I'm gonna play Hunter."
Yeah.
And it was a quick process to that. I sort of auditioned, sent the audition in. I think I'd mentioned this in an interview that my wife, I had just like sort of driven back from. I'd gotten an audition, had to go to Dallas, shoot a film, and then drive back from Dallas. No time to really work on the audition, and it happened to be a huge, a recurring
Yeah.
character on an HBO show.
Yeah.
So
And that HBO show is The Girls on the Bus. Sorry, we didn't really
yeah.
kind of name the title, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
please
we
keep
probably
going.
should. We're not getting off the path, are we? And my wife said to me, "God," and there's times when you feel this way about auditions. If they don't hire me, I don't know what the hell they're thinking. It's like
Yeah.
that's the best that I got, and you should look at that because that's really good. And it was one of those. It was, a couple days later, put on hold. A couple days later, I'm doing a show in New York, having, and then I get it's about this career. It's the more you know, the less you know, because
Sure.
I move away from New York, and then I get somehow the biggest thing that I've ever sort of had in a long time back in.
Mhm.
None of it ever makes sense. Um, but yeah, huge britches to fill. But there's I've had a very unique opportunity to work on a bunch of geniuses more in theater than on film per se. But weirdly, like they're all kind of connected because Hunter was a huge fan of F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I had played Hemingway in a play that was about F. Scott Fitzgerald and their friendship. It was called The Jazz Age, written by a wonderful Alan Nee. Actually met my wife on that play. She was playing Zelda
That's
on there.
cool.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
And
Yeah.
one of my dearest and still dearest friends was playing F. Scott. So having spun into these people, there was another guy named W. Eugene Smith who I had to develop almost for a decade in all the
Mhm.
workshops and stuff. And then we got a major off-Broadway production where we really got to let it fly. And there was he had a very specific way of talking that I had. Part of his jaw was shot off in the
Mm.
war. So he had a very
Yeah.
specific way of, of talking that it was wonderful to play within that vibe. but actually on the stage we had to pull it back because no one could understand me. And there, plus, so those guys. But the thing that was interesting about Hunter versus those guys is both of those they were very stand and deliver characters, and I have a very squirrely energy. My mind shoots in many different ways, and it's always trying to harness that. So with Hunter, he had that sort of energy as well, physically and the way his mind worked. So there was something about stripping away pieces of these other parts and putting them into the blender. And it was the right mix of things. And the more that I learned about him, so many things I connect with, so many thoughts, and the thoughts in doing all the research and doing all the reading, the things that would land on me were, it was wonderful to see how things that I would take from a book and then see what, is on the quoted posters or what's online, what are his things, because I really came tabula rasa kind of at the part. I didn't have all these preformed notions of him.
Sure.
So that was kind of great, and then to sort of have the time over the whole series to just dig into work and read and watch and absorb and let him mix around inside me for that amount of time was it's great. It's great.
Yeah, that's super cool. What an opportunity. What was it fun on set? Do you want to talk more about the show itself?
Sure. It was one of these parts that it required such a focus of, he held his jaw differently. He walked differently. He's got a whole aura to himself that I kind of in between takes was staying in my own, we did the Vegas episode. I think it's episode 3. And it was just, on that one, I just let him loose. Like he was just wandering all over the place, talking with people, just to let him, this is the place that I love. It was just, that was one of those where I really got to not just pace in the hallways and back. So I love just connecting with other actors on a set. It's just a wonderful feeling, and that's one of the joys. Collaboration is one of the reasons why you do this. For me, at this stage in the game, it's that sense of when we're all sort of putting our minds, the smartest idea in the room wins. Everybody's advocating for their character, but also keeping story in mind, and there's many different levels when you're dealing with a whole series to think about too. It's very different than just coming in and doing a guest star or doing a film, having, dealing with different directors coming in. That was a new experience for me, where they're entering kind of your world, but the cast was uniformly wonderful. Watching them work was when I could sort of let it, there was always times where I knew that I was done for the day and I just want to hang out a little bit and just watch the rest of the, what else is going on. Because my stuff is so isolated with Melissa, Melissa Benoist and her character Sadie, that there was, there wasn't a lot. I mean, if I'm in the scene, you don't see me. So there's not a lot of time to interact. I mean, we peppered certain things around, and I can see, in the revealing of the show, and I could see how they had to establish some rules about. But yeah, I mean, I'm just working with some, Carla Gugino. My God, Melissa's just fantastic. But for me, Carla's been someone who's for a female actress, what a career, my Lord! She's just always great, and present and unique, and there was one point where a little wonderful piece for me that I'll always hold on to was she was like, I want a scene with Hunter. And I was like, yay. And then we got one, which was great.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I understand why. But, we got that next episode. We were doing stuff on the bus, and I'm appearing behind Carla's, head and saying, and but only Melissa could see, but I could say whatever I want. It was just, my goal was to see if I could crack her up.
Yeah.
There were moments that we tried to play with to see, what's the roadmap for this guy. I'm the, for those of you who haven't seen the show, it's about a group of female reporters who are covering a political campaign, and the lead reporter, who sort of falls on the independent side of the thing, but probably left leaning. She idolizes Hunter S. Thompson. So when she has moments of conflict or is doubting herself, I'll just pop in and as Hunter, and give her advice or support or question what she's doing. But that makes me the magical realism. So there's a certain amount where if she talks to me too much, she's nuts. So we know there's a rarefied air that we can play with. It was very similar to Reservation Dogs, where how they used the chief. It was just when I got the part, I was such a huge fan of Reservation, and I just worked on a little episode. I was like, oh, this is this show's chief. This is how I can, this has opened the door. Not that I want to rip off what he did, but that's, that place is something that he identified with so well. His performance was just mwah. So, the archetype of what I was doing and sort of, being the magical realism, and then also grounding it in all the authenticity that I could bring to it from
it. That makes total sense. So you mentioned guest directors and kind of coming into your realm when it comes to the TV show. Did that allow for flexibility a little bit on your end to be like, I think Hunter would do this rather than that?
Universally. There was never, everybody was always, you hear on when we as actors listen to others actors talking on podcasts, one of the things that's I never had sort of put, but I heard, I think it was Oscar Isaac talking about being an advocate for the character, that once you start to dive into things, it's not about hey, look at me. It's from 30 years in New York of developing really wonderful plays with really great companies, going off, whether it be for 2 weeks in the woods, and we work on plays with guys like Lucas Noth, who've won Broadway. So it's having those experiences and working with these kind of people have empowered me, that I'm coming to the table not just as an actor, but also as a producer, also as a writer. I'm thinking about story. I'm not trying to just, showboat. But if we're going to talk about this topic, oh my God, I know he'd have an opinion about it. There was one point in particular which ended up in the show, which was sort of Melissa was making an argument, and she listed off like 3 presidents or 3 writers, and I knew for sure that he would have an opinion about each of those, even whether even it's an insult, that it and is it okay to have that back and forth? Because I know when I talk to myself, there's a certain person, and there's always a back and forth. It's not like we just monologue to this, invisible person. That invisible, the person who's in the back of our mind always has stuff to throw in, whether we like it or not. So I felt like there was room for that, and everybody agreed, and some of that got into the show, which was great.
That has to feel good. Like, everyone agrees this is the right direction for the character.
That's cool. I knew that responsibility, and if we take him out of the treasure chest, we can't. It can't just be anyone saying it. It's got to have his. I mean, not always. We say normal things all the time, but he had such a love for words and such a love for rhythm and such a love for. Rather than call someone an asshole, he would call him a 1,000,000-pound shit hammer. That's delightful. If someone was, slow, he'd say they approached the stage like a slow moving golem. It immediately, the word organization brings a giggle, but then the things that it supplies also brings, and nails it on just. But it's also very unique. So as much as I could, I wanted to bring to the table. I think he'd say this or and they just kind of let me go. It was great. I felt very supported in trying to figure out, this unique little corner of the show.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. If let's say I was a huge Hunter S. Thompson fan and I'm watching your work, did the show or you work in like Easter eggs or some of his work, maybe some of his books, some of the movies? Like, does any of that kind of pop up and they should be on the lookout for if they might be in the show?
I mean, his whole canon is quotable. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's. I always tried as much as I could to bring in, to stay away from trying to bring the quotes that we all know.
Sure.
Or
Sure.
that's the beginning, that's where we land. But there's also, at one point I perused, 10 lists, or 10 things that you have to keep important in life. And one of them was never talk to a cop in a raincoat. And I just loved that. I can't remember if that got it in. So I would bring these little things, like if Melissa and I were done, I would also say, hey, never talk to cop in a raincoat. Just because they were just so uniquely random, but truths to, and always trying to. This was what was really fun about it. Not just trying to use any lines, but also trying to feel, okay, what would her mind be saying to her? So what is the thing that she learned from Hunter that's trying to break through to what she's doing now? So you had to be very clever about which ones to use. And then suddenly you find one in this thing that we were talking about, the list. It was about, Bobby Kennedy's voice had a psychic connection with the Rolling Stones. So everybody wanted that trip. And
that's awesome.
So she had just met, she mentioned something about him. And I, what was the interesting thing also is that I knew when I would pop these out, there weren't things that I could stumble on like I just did.
Yeah.
He was definitely a beginning of the thought to the end of the thought, even though there were 5 different complete campsite trails that he made in a complete other topic before he got to the end of his point. But it was there. There weren't hesitations.
Yeah.
He wanted to eliminate the steps from the writer to the page.
That's cool.
It's an interesting way to, well, you have to, but there's a forward, there's no sitting back and figuring it out.
You're not pondering.
There's no pondering, so, or at least that's where, I'm also not pulling from an older version of him. This isn't a biopic. So this is a certain, I can, but that's what's really cool about it being magical realism, that I can pull these threads in from what she knows about Hunter's life. But we were using it as, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. That time for him is what we're jamming on. That's cool. That's her version of him that's going to visit. My clothing never changed. My looks never changed. It was just always the same. I did get a coat. I got a coat in Central Park, which was it was a nice choice. Very nice choice.
Good touch. Yeah. Was it cool, like being on like a Max, like an HBO Max kind of set? Like, was that different? I guess I don't know.
God. My first day, it was like 300 people and me. It was just, you're in this beautiful sound stage. They have a bus that pulls apart. They got screens that make it move. We had like a 1970 campaign bus. We had all and 50 extras decked out in that clothing. And it was just, it was going to be, a oneer with me looking up, speaking a little monologue, blowing a smoke ring at the end, and it was, what was great about there's that moment, because I've worked in many different stages of, whether it be a short film, an independent film, a big budget thing, large scale, small scale, you bring the same amount of work to everything. But there was a moment when I was sitting on the balcony looking at all this stuff, and I'm the only one here today. This would not be the day to screw shit up. So but it didn't,
Yeah.
That the first time, the oneer, he's coming down, I do the thing, I blow the smoke ring, cut everything, and you hear laughter outside.
That's good. That's
I
so
mean,
good.
we sort of nailed it on one, and then we explored different things, but that response was so, you learn, you miss an audience on set. There's
Yeah.
something that you love about the instantaneous of stage, where there's a feedback right there, but you learn to keep your radar out the more that you do,
Mhm.
and the crew becomes, to a certain extent, a little bit of an audience. I love you never want to screw up a shot, but there's nothing like finding a nice little ender of a scene, and the DP's shaking because he's trying not to laugh.
Okay.
That
We have to talk about did you have a favorite moment breaking someone, either a cast member or someone on set? Do you have a favorite joke or instance I can't not ask? Like,
I mean, the coming out of the car in the middle of the serious moment, where I'm hotboxing in the car, and suddenly he's there. He's like, he comes out with a fully loaded joint, smoke coming out of the car. He's like, fuck this shit. I mean, it was it was such a yeah. I mean, but there's stuff that is on the cutting room floor that we didn't get to see. That is probably some of that stuff. But I didn't have. I didn't want to have a it's like I have to play this guy, so I don't want to have this one line that I want to get in, and then I could hold on to that as the one that, they're like I explained in that moment because I came in with these ideas, and everybody was like, yeah, that should totally be in there. Everybody was agreement, and it worked.
Mhm.
And there were people who responded, who I have wonderful friends out there who are keeping up with the show, and there was a lot of individual messages after that episode. They were like,
That's
wow, that
nice.
was this really landed on me, and it was like, yeah, great, good. I've done some of my work.
That's
I
awesome.
can't write, we can't, you don't want to go in trying to make the audience feel this or that, but knowing that he has such a fan base and such, people idolize him,
Yeah.
I know I have to earn that respect.
Have you gotten feedback from just general Thompson fans about like, hey, really like what you're doing, or any feedback at all?
I don't want to find out that they're not.
I looked at that question. I was like, well, I'm not sure he wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe I hope so, because I brought everything that I could physically, tried to make sure that I was capturing him, as authentically as I could. And there's times where he's a gangly guy, and he has like an over exaggerated physicality, but that can read as too big on camera. So there was like like there was one point where I saw him like literally do like, and it was just like, it felt like Foghorn Leghorn. But then if you owned it with him in the scene, but I remember going after, I think that's the one, there's a mirror shot where she gets her first story, and she's going to go in, and you see me in the mirror. And that was something I talked to the director, a couple of times, like, that's not too big, right? That's, I feel like that's spot on, but you gotta let me know. I can pull back if and making sure that if we are going to quote him, we quote him right. And then you start to, it doesn't take me too long with any character to start defending him. He becomes part of you, whether he's a serial killer or not. I will start to fight for him and make, I love making the audience want to befriend the bad guy, but also, show the tough guy with the heart too. And the punching of two strong archetypes together is something that I really love to play with as much as I can. And
That's
he's
awesome.
just a wonderful mix of all of that,
That's incredible. I'm sure everyone loves your representation of Thompson. I refuse to believe otherwise. But I would love to talk to you about some other stuff. Is there anything else about the show you want to talk about, or anything else you want to kind of call out that maybe I didn't ask?
Just what a huge honor it was, and to be part of that family. I mean, my God, it's the work that they put behind it, and I'm proud of it. it's a good show. It's something that I'm enjoying, and it's not necessarily a quote unquote guy show, but I'm in. What's great is I knew it as I was watching it. You root for Melissa. You get tied up in her, in her world, and these actors and actresses that are surrounding her. It's very compelling, and everybody's got a really cool journey from beginning to end. So it's nice to be, you never know what the results are going to be. It's nice when you can say, yeah, I was part of this great project.
I'm sure that feels good. Speaking of a great project, and I refuse to leave this conversation without talking about Red Dead Redemption. So we're going to talk about Red Dead Redemption. That's one of my favorite games. I loved that game. Was it fun working on it? Tell me everything you remember. I loved that game so much. Did you like being Cletus? Was that fun? Was it?
Oh, I mean, at that stage, and this is Red Dead 2. This is one of Cletus.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I got invited to do the mocap on that one. So
was that
up
cool?
Until that point, it was cool and challenging.
Yeah.
There's you're running around with, everybody knows sort of there's balls and the lycra suits and whatever, but we're sort of running around in cowboy boots with this on. Now, when you're all running around and shooting at each other in this huge warehouse with there's nothing there really other than us doing this thing. I can't go into the specifics of stuff, but it's a fairly, it's clean. And then there's this stuff that you just kind of run around. That's fun in the young, kid cowboys and Indians. You could just get lost in that. But when the time comes to, like, the scene where he's about to get hung, you better figure out what you're doing real quick. It's like, this is why we paid you. And it's to act around through past your given circumstances of this guy in a lycra suit with balls on him and cowboy boots, but then you have to really go deep and act, get there to that place where you are pleading for your life for real. It's not a video game. So that was very challenging because you almost lose obviously with running around, you just gotta run around with a gun. It's serious. I mean, not to make that it's that easy. But there's a certain amount of joyous play that you can tap into and your imagination takes hold. But then when the scene becomes real, and it was just great, all of them were dynamite actors, and it was a really, really, I felt like a privilege to join them. Some dynamite people who were, this is, the guys who are the leads in those games, years that they are filming this film with the lycra jumpsuits and the balls and the things on their head, But for me, it's really cool that I've had this, long-standing relationship with Rockstar Games, who just happens to, and I've seen the development of their stuff. I was, to have done the early days of a GTA, and then, Manhunt. What the ones that I've had a part in are pretty good. To BioShock's great,
very good. I love BioShocks. BioShock.
I got to play a creeper in the two, so I got I got to do the whole like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Just shattered my voice for weeks. But I mean, and now it's weird because I've had touchstones in these really, very celebrated games. I'll go on to a set and someone's like, dude, you're Cletus in Red Dead 2. I mean, and it's, it's so further from anything that I sort of connect with because I'm not a gamer. I don't play them at all. That's not, I remember when I first got cast in one, I remember borrowing my friend's system and suddenly, like, I started at 7 and suddenly it was like 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, that's the life. Yeah.
And I was like, no, there's no way I'll succeed. I'll get into this and I will not be able to stay focused on my work. There's no fucking way that I can be, and I'm not going to be a gamer. Yeah, no.
It's too good. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. No, there's no way. I'm done. Nope, get it away from me. But I love to play in it. And that's, it's a wonderful side shoot of this. And you learn, that I've had a voiceover career.
Yeah.
There's certain things that again, little details you can take from that side of the work and bring that into other things. There's cheats. There's times when I'll be doing a lot of voiceover work, whether it be, video games and then suddenly I'll get on a set or in a play and it's like, okay, now I know it sounds like I know what I'm doing here, but I'll have a conversation with the director. Like, no idea. But I'm faking it. I'm faking it really good because this is what I do. Even when I don't know, I got to make you think that I do. So I'm just letting you know, no idea. So help me out. It's a awesome. Fun conversation to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I've always loved to be, the thing about this career is you want sustainability.
Sure.
And the fact that I've, been able to have little footholds in coming from the boards, then voiceovers and commercials. I've done, video games, and then also to do television, film, web series, and developing material. Yeah. I mean, I've learned on all those to sort of, I feel like I'm proud of my bag of tricks that I've accumulated along the way.
That's awesome. But speaking of kind of using your bag of tricks for some new stuff, like what do you have coming up? What do you have like maybe in production that maybe be released soonish?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've shot in the last year that, is in various forms of post. I just banged out like 4 projects working with some really fun. I got to work Jackie Earl Haley.
Oh, that's cool.
Which was just so much fun. On a wonderful production we shot in Arkansas called I don't know if I can talk about. This is where I.
Well, then don't. Yeah, then don't. I don't want to get in
trouble. Yeah, and then I have about a year ago, I was able to direct my first film, my first short. So I'm putting that out there to festivals now for the first time, and I have a lot of. There's a lot of things that I've shot that are going to hopefully make their ways to festivals that are in the submission process now. And then
how's that gone? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how's
it's a whole different world. It's I'm learning more as I go. It's I've always sort of, I think one of the things you have to keep in mind if you're going to make a short, then make it a short.
Yeah.
Because if it strays longer, then you risk eliminating yourself from competition at some places, unless your story needs to be told in a certain amount of time. But when festivals are trying to put together things, they're putting together short films, so it's an hour and a half block. So in the 15-minute range, lets them get 6 of those films in an hour and a half block. Now, if you mess with that font of how they organize that, then that just that alone, So it's like it's tough because it's hard to tell a tight, good story in 15 to 20 minutes. For sure. But I've seen that succeed, and boy, they can be just as satisfying as some of the other. While I was doing Hunter, I had these great opportunities in filming where I could go away for 6 days and just jump into a short, play the lead, leave set, film for 5 days, get on a plane, come back, and then jump into Hunter again. That's cool. But only because it was a short was I able to do that. I wouldn't be able to do a feature. And with that as an actor, I think there's it gives you a chance to dip your toe into an archetype of a character and see what you can do with it, what's your spin on it. There was something called the Call of the Clown Horn, and then something called The Stranger that were sort of making the rounds last year, and they won some acclaim and won me some awards and stuff. But one of them was like a sort of a depressive John Cusack kind of sad sack but also is on the, did just try to off himself. So you want to handle that as much as you can. And also, and I just love him as an archetype of that kind of thing. And then The Stranger was more like a sort of a spin on my take of The Fugitive, of a guy who's like everybody thinks he's this thing, but he's not, and playing within that sandbox.
Yeah,
And then
sounds fun.
that allows me to try that on for 5 days without the pressure of a feature for 3 months or whatever. But kind of give, okay, this is now, if I get, not that these characters are going to be the same, but these are, I know what I have within me and new threads that I could pull for when those times come around, or they just become these wonderful films that people have been responding to. And you know, that's, I don't bring any kind of different kind of level to a feature than you do to a short.
Sure.
And that's served me well. And it sort of, you know, if there is a more of a beginner sense in the film, what I've seen is like everybody's like, oh shit, this guy's for reals. And then it raises everybody's game, you know, with how you present yourself as whether you're the number one or whatever, you know, but being the number one. I've had the good fortune to do that a lot in the independent world with some projects that didn't see the light of day.
Sure.
But there is an importance of how to, you know, guide the ship, how to be on, you know, spread the right energy and make sure it's a collaborative force that everybody's included in. You know, you have, you need to own some of that you know, when you're doing that kind of project.
That's awesome.
So it's been great to sort of keep spinning in that, you know, and then bring that knowledge to the next one. That's
cool. Yeah. Anything? I know you said you have a bunch of stuff like in the fires. Anything you want to call out? It's coming out soonish.
Well, there's a post-apocalyptic film that I shot with a buddy of mine named Stephen Ogg, who's from The Walking Dead. And also he's the guy that played Trevor on the GTA film.
I know him very well. I want to know Trevor.
So this has been a labor of love for a good amount of time, and we're nearing the end of post on that. It's taken us a while because it was an independent without a lot of money, and it's a big world building, and it looks like we made it for $1 bajillion, and we didn't make it for $1 bajillion. But it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea for sure, because it's got like a little bit of, you know, we used to say it was like video, a little bit of Videodrome, a little bit of oh, the director's gonna kill me now that I'm not thinking of it. It's a really interesting you know, genre piece.
Yeah.
You know, where the basic premise is cancer's gone airborne and is a sentient being, and you know, everybody else is in different stages of
it sounds super interesting. Yeah, holy cow. Yeah,
it's really a cool project. And yeah, there's I just did they wrote me back into The Equalizer, which was really fun. I thought I was going to be just a you know, I was in the season finale of season 3. And I thought it was just going to be which came out great. I was very happy with sort of like robber situation, taking hostages, and but sort of got arrested, but got saved by, you know, main characters on the show, and now they've written me back.
Cool.
So that was really fun. You know, that doesn't always have to happen, and I've had that happen a couple of times where I've done something that I thought was an isolated thing, and then they've written me back into
it means you're doing something right?
Yeah. As my dad would have said, it's better than a kick in the ass with a frozen boot.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, I'm taking a lot of your time, BJ. I love talking to you. I talk to you.
It's such a delight.
For sure. Where can folks find you, though? Is there a social media account?
Yeah, sure. www.pjsosko.com. That is a really fun website. When I left New York, I'd never had a website or anything. And a really dear friend of mine, who's a wonderful web designer named Michael Thomas Holmes, shout out to him. He put together a dope website that captured the chaos that is me. And I feel like it really, it's weird when you put 30 years of work, you know, and you can't even include the first, you know, 15, 20 into a place, and you're like, oh, man, I've been around, I've done some really good things.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so yeah, check it out, because it's a really fun website to sort of peruse through, and there's links to past work there's a short film on there called Bagman that was done. We did a long time ago, but I think it is a perfectly, beautifully structured short film. I
Sure.
think it's got there's a great turn. You don't know where it's going. It's shot beautifully. It's a really, so if you're on a good, it's 15, 20 minutes long. It's a wonderful
Easy.
short, but there's a link for it on the site that you could check out. There's a link for a bunch of stuff on there. That's all worthwhile. If you find yourself with 15, 20 minutes to spare and you want to check out a short, there's stuff that's linked there. I'm very proud of all the work that's listed there.
Cool. We'll make sure it's in the description, folks. Again, PJ, this is wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for being a fan of the show and being a fan of Hunter.
Of course.
Such an
Thanks,
icon.
everybody. Yeah.
All right, man.
See you, everybody.